Looking at biblical marriage, and various principles in regards to that. When God created man, he had a plan, and it is a perfect plan, and there's really no variation when it comes to marriage, regardless of what society today wants to say, declare, or hope for, or practice. It's very plain and very straightforward in the Scripture. And as we concluded last time that we met, we were talking about wives and responsibilities that they have, and husbands' responsibilities that they have. And their different responsibilities in different areas. And among the things we pointed out was that women, by nature, on average, in any given day, speak 3 times more often than men do. And that's just the way that we're made up. And it's not that one is better than the other or anything of that nature. It's just that there's a difference. I kind of compare the two. That men talk in black and white, and women talk in full color. You get the whole picture, the various shades of color and so on in the conversation. And that has a very important place in the relationship as well. And as we see, as we're going to look here at 1 Corinthians 14:35, and if they, speaking of women in the church at Corinth, and if they will learn anything, let them ask their husbands at home. In the Corinthian church, a problem developed during the services and the getting together. A number of them were just talking and asking questions and kind of ignoring the format of the service. And they needed to know this, and they wanted to know why that, and so on and so forth. But it wasn't the time or the place to ask these things. And Paul simply gave a very simple instructions. The wives should ask their husbands at home about what's going on at the church and why it's this way and why it's that way, and so on. And this was to keep things in an orderly fashion was the purpose of this. But wives do not try to dominate. This is something that wives should not try to do, is dominate. Sometimes it's easy to do with some women more than others. They become dominant in the family and assuming leadership in the family, which is principally the husband's role as leader in the family. Don't resist your husband's decisions, even if they are wrong ones. There's a time and place to talk about correction and the right way to do things. And Paul is simply pointing out here in these instructions that the time and place is between a husband and the wife to discuss things. And if they see something, the wife sees something that is not right, that this is not as it should be, that, that she has a place and an opportunity to discuss this, not as the lead or the dominating person, but to give input. Don't keep reminding him. Women, don't keep reminding your husbands of past mistakes. Newsflash. Everybody makes mistakes. There are only one exception to that. Jesus. He doesn't make any mistakes. But we do. In God's plan, the day will come, the time is going to come that all of us will be perfect like God is perfect. We will make no more mistakes. Neither men nor women will not make any more mistakes. But let's recognize that we do make mistakes. And again, there's a proper way to approach these. Husbands make mistakes, but don't keep reminding him of his past mistakes. You might want to deal with the present mistakes, but not the past ones. All right? Wives should not try to be their husband's conscience. He's got one of those, and you got one of those. And so you use your conscience for yourself, and the man is to use his own conscience in the whole matter of leadership in the home. Now, let's talk a little bit about reducing tensions in marriage. Again, since nobody's perfect, there will be times in the marriage that there's going to be tensions, tense things are going to go on. Expect it. Realize that neither one is perfect and there's going to be conflict at times. But what we want to consider is ways and means of, well, reducing those significantly, making life a lot more smoother and a lot more easier. And so therefore, the process of adjustment in the marriage relationship is a lifetime commitment. We're going to work on that the rest of our lives. All right? Making marriage work requires great effort on the part of both partners. On the part of the husband and upon the part of the wife, it takes effort. We are individuals. We're still not perfect. And there's going to be times of disagreement, conflicts, and so on. We need to recognize that those things can, do, and will happen. But let's work through them. Let's work through them. All right? Half-hearted attempts just won't do. Everybody's got to go wholehearted in this, husbands and wives. Several ways to help to reduce tension in the home and prolong the marriage relationship are. Let's look at several ways in which this can be done. A, at the beginning or prior to marriage. Before you get married, you should have some good conversations. The potential wife, the potential husbands. Honest, open conversations. Get to know who you're going to marry. Talk about everything that's important to you. The wife or potential wife talks about everything that's important to her. The husband, the potential husband, talks about everything that is important to him. And there needs to be some understanding as these will overlap and interlock with each other on this whole matter of setting the stage for a successful marriage. Come to an agreement on the biblical roles of husband and wife. One of the things that you find out when you read the scripture is you find out what the male role is. You also find out what the female role is. The Bible has all kinds of illustrations and events that illustrate this. And both the husband and the wife need to understand the other's position, their attitudes, their goals, their desires, their dreams, things that are important to them. These need to be talked about. They need to be understood. And we need to get into this very heavily. Each must know what the other's views are concerning careers. When Kathy and I met, she knew that I was a preacher. She knew that that's what I was going to be. The career was already set. And it's not like that sometimes when people get married young, the career is not set already. There may be a job or a part-time job or a fill-in job or whatever. But as far as a career is concerned. And, being a preacher and a pastor, that just doesn't change. That's what God called me to do, and that's what I am. And Kathy knew, understood that. And what a challenge that was. that the being a pastor, it creates a lot of different challenges when you're dealing with the church and things of this nature. Well, anyway, children. Some people want children, some people don't want children, some people want large families, some want medium-sized families, some want one, and some want none. You need to have an agreement on this. You need to know up front what you want and what each one expects. Discussion. Leadership of the home. Who's going to be the head? It is vital to clarify whose functions and what roles. So you need to have a fundamental understanding what each one thinks about this. And if there is a situation that you come across that you just simply can't accept, you can't find any common ground of adjustment on this, not willing to accept it or to moderate it or whatever, then it's probably a good idea not to get married, because that's going to be a bone of contention. If it's that important and the conflict is there, it's going to be difficult. It is going to be hard. B, surrender the non-essentials that causes friction and tension in the home. Need to start out and say, okay, the priority. What are the priorities? What are the important issues? The vast, overwhelming majority of things that a couple will conflict over really don't need to have conflict over. They are not that important. But things that are extremely important, there needs to be fundamental agreement to. That just needs to be understood. A fundamental agreement. Now, here's a little interesting observation. When you're looking for a husband or you're looking for a wife, this happens unconsciously in most cases. Not all cases, but in most cases. You will look for somebody, you think you're looking for somebody that is exactly like you. And you're not. You're looking for somebody that is opposite what you are. When the wife is different than the husband's personality, makeup, desires, patterns of living and thinking. For example, the wife may sleep in. She's a late night person, but she's not a morning person. The husband, on the other hand, may be a morning person, up at the crack of dawn or before, and to bed early. These are things that you got to realize that are part of the differences. And they'll come unconsciously. I don't think I've ever heard anybody say, well, you know, as they were looking for a husband or looking for a wife, say, well, I'm a morning person. What about you? Oh, I don't know. Maybe I'm a morning person. Maybe I'm a night person. I don't know. Or maybe they will answer that question. But I've never heard anybody really asking. I'm simply pointing out that generally speaking, husbands and wives have different things to bring into the marriage that the other one doesn't have. And you need to embrace and accept these things, because they can become a strength on one side, and on the other side, it can be a weakness. And so those who are strong in one area compensate for those who are weak in that area. And when you learn those things and adjust your lifestyle and living to accommodate those things, you find that you complement each other by the fact that you're different. So it's a very important thing to keep in mind. Well, each partner in the marriage has little peculiarities, that's what we're talking about, that can aggravate the other, and each partner knows just what those peculiarities are. You find those out. You do. Okay? Both partners must be careful not to deliberately do what they know aggravates the other. Yeah, sometimes you're tempted to do that, just to needle them a little bit. That type of thing. We need to understand that those things are there. And then, okay, C, keep a sense of humor in marriage relationships. Learn to be willing to laugh at differences and not take offense at them. And when two people can laugh, laughter is good for you. Laughter is healthy. The Bible even tells us that a merry heart doeth good like a medicine. It really does. Immediately, laughter releases tension. And when tension builds up and builds up and builds up, it can explode into rage and anger. But if you begin learning how to laugh at the differences, not making fun of the person to put them down, but simply laughing together over the fact that this is just different with us, you will find the tension is dissipated. You'll find that you'll learn to be easily more acceptable of each other and to accept each other's peculiarities. Well, I'm going to change them. Bad news. Peculiarities are developed from within the personality. Within the personality. Learn to accept each other's personality. That's the way they are. And embrace those things. And be patient with those things. Now, there's going to be areas that you're in total agreement on. And that's fantastic. Now, if you end up in a situation where both husband and wife have identically the same types of personalities, the same type of peculiarities. In other words, they're mirror images of each other. You're going to find that that just kind of be a negative kind of, it can be a negative kind of experience between the two of you. You might think, well, they ought to get well together. But it leaves certain things in a marriage that are not taken care of or done, because both of them have the same feeling about this, that, or the other on everything. So it just doesn't get done. For example, one person may be highly organized, detail-oriented. The spouse, not so much. Not so much. Obviously, the one that's more detailed-oriented needs to be taking care of more details. But then the person who's not detail-oriented oftentimes is a very personable individual. They mesh well with people. They can tolerate more in variances and so on. And they understand that. So these are things that you learn and begin to understand and develop in. Okay, usually one partner has greater sense of humor than the other, just as we pointed out. Be careful to look for the humor in situations which occur. It always helps to alleviate the frustration, as we pointed out, of the situation if you can see humor in it. Okay. laugh about things. Laugh about things and don't make everything a huge issue. Learn what needs to be huge issues. Learn what needs to be less of an issue, just as a variation or a difference. Very important. D, in serious matters, there are 6 important principles to follow. We're going to look at these. There are serious things that you need to deal with, and there needs to be some kind of a conclusion come. Number 1, do not argue with your partner. Belittle, insult, or resort to name calling. Just don't do that. From the very beginning, don't let things go down to that level. Just don't do that. 2, do not withdraw yourself into a shell with hurt feelings, not talking, etc. This can easily happen. You have one personality is very dominant, and the other one's personality is not very dominant. And they have a tendency to back off, to back away. Don't let these things occur, because what this does is, instead of drawing you closer together, it pulls you further apart. And you want to pull together. All right? 3, do not retaliate against your mate. Even when you know that your mate is wrong, overcome. Crucify the flesh. Yeah. Your flesh. Don't try to crucify that person for their weakness. You got to work these things out. You got to talk about these things. You got to understand these things. You got to realize how they're a part of each other, the differences, and why they're there. You got to talk about those things. 4, do engage in calm, reasonable discussion. Always try to see things from the other's viewpoint and be willing to change if you're wrong. And if you're wrong, admit it. Don't hesitate to say, I'm sorry. I was wrong. Forgive me. And somebody says that, one spouse says that to the other, then what is the other spouse to do? They are to forgive and move on. Yeah, move on. All right? Such words as these can bridge gaps. Don't always be ready to justify your position. Crucify your flesh and preserve the peace in your home. Never ridicule or scorn each other. The sarcastic put down is cruel. There's certain things that you just don't do. You come into the marriage situation, we're not going to do that. We're not going to act that way. And suppose you are dating somebody and they come in a situation with another person and it ends up into a horrendous argument and they lose their temper and they're just simply going goofy over that. That's a good thing to look out for. It's not going to be easy to get that person changed from that habit or pattern that they're in that is like that. It's not impossible, but it's not easy to get those changes to take place. Well, so a couple things to do. Do pray together. Husbands and wives should pray together. Not necessarily all the time, but there should be times that you do pray together. And not self-righteous. Don't pray self-righteously. Pharisee type of prayers. Lord, show him or her where they are wrong. Straighten them out. You might want to start saying, Lord, where am I wrong? What did I do wrong? Show that to me. 2, do determine to solve your problems yourselves without outside help. Many years ago, I talked to a very happily married couple for many years. And they said, they just didn't understand the current younger society. They have a problem come up, and they don't solve the problem. They get a divorce. And that person told me, said that in their marriage, we look to solve problems. Problems are going to come. It's time to solve them. Not ignore them, not run from them, and certainly, definitely not getting a divorce. Problems do come up. Being a pastor is one of the interesting things that I found in today's culture and society. You'll have a married couple that have a problem and an issue. It usually boils down to several minor issues, is what it usually does, which is over the course of days, weeks, months, years, has grown and grown and grown. And now divorce is on the table. And what we need to realize is that divorce should never be on the table. Because people just kind of think that that's an easy way out of a difficult situation that I don't want to deal with. There's nothing easy about it. Nobody wins in a divorce. Everybody loses. The husband loses. The wife loses. Children, number 1 child, number 2 child, number 3 child. Everybody loses. Marriage is worth fighting for. Take divorce off the table. Don't come into the marriage with that in the background somewhere. It doesn't exist. We'll see a little more about later on in regards to that. Solve your problems. The modern church has come to advocate the use of counselors in every problem. Well, you got to see this counselor. You got to see that counselor. Now, there's legitimate counselors, and there's a legitimate reason to see counselors, but not for every little nitpicking problem. Learn to solve problems yourself and deal with those. Learn to do that, okay? We now realize that there are times when there is a genuine need for counseling. But most often, emphasis on counseling is overdone. Well, the experts. And oftentimes the experts have got as much problems as you've got. They may be different problems, but they still got problems. There is time that counseling is good. But that has to be done with wisdom. And there needs to be the involvement of getting both spouses involved in the counseling situation in order to come to resolutions that are going to be good. Solve your problems together with the Lord through prayer, definitely. Deal with problems as they arise. Don't allow them to intensify. Well, we're going to put this off and put this off. And it just keeps building and building and building, and then all of a sudden there's an explosion. You don't want that. Forget the past and don't drag up past mistakes. Here's a fact. You can't change the past. It's like concrete. When it's poured, you can move it and mold it and shape it and so on. But very quickly, it sets up. And though you may say, boy, I wish I'd have done this, yesterday or the day before when we were pouring the concrete. Now you can't do anything with it except tear it up and start over again. And that's what happens in some marriages. They just tear it up and start over again. But that has built-in problems. If you don't solve the problem that is causing you to head for divorce, you will not solve it in your next marriage. You will actually bring the problem with you. Even you don't think, well, it wasn't my fault, it was my spouse's fault. You will find that there's a measure of fault with both spouses. I've been in ministry for many years, and I've talked with, I don't even know how many couples now. But one of the things I found is that when it reaches this divorce point, that both participants are involved to one degree or another. I have never yet seen where it was possible for one person to say, I was 100% not at fault. They may not have known what was happening, and that may have been the fault. They should have been more sensitive that there's things wrong in this marriage, and we need to work those out. And sometimes they identify those things as, well, I'm not at fault. It's the other person. And the other person is reacting out of absolute frustration, trying to get a resolution, and the other spouse doesn't see a problem. So, working together and talking about things, keep the communication lines open. Talk about things. Understand each other's viewpoint. Understand why each other thinks the way they think and why they're thinking that way. And let's work out the situation, come to a conclusion. All right? Deal with problems and don't drag up past mistakes. Don't let disputes drag on for days or weeks or months, in some cases even years. Deal with the dispute before going to bed each night. Think the good and not the evil. Remember what attracted you to your spouse. And say, that's what attracted me. Don't let something come up and not deal with it. The fact is this. Any problem, any situation that a married couple has or is going to have can be resolved equitably. Can be done. As long as both persons are committed to making this work. Simple principle. It takes two people to make a marriage. It takes one person to destroy it. How? By not being a part of solving the problem. Not being a part of solving the problem. And as we look at this whole matter of divorce and remarriage a little bit later on, we will cover those things and significant